Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the PM Learning Series. My name is Shavi. I am the host for today. We have a very special guest today that I can't wait to introduce you. But before that, please introduce yourself. Drop in the chat where you're joining us from. So this is part of LinkedIn Learning's PM Learning Series, a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product practitioners share their PM career journeys and lessons learned to inspire aspiring PM and current PM to level up their product career. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter in the event description to receive recaps of key takeaways from this event, as well as future event updates. So today with me, I have a very special guest. Let me bring her to the stream. Hi, Kristen.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Thanks for joining. Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm really, really excited because the first time I came to know you was at WIP, Women in Product Conference, about maybe 2 years ago. I remember you walking us through the 3B frameworks, examples of how you apply behavioral design to change life for better, to help so many people making small adjustments in their life, all for the better. So I was so mind blown by some of the, case studies, frameworks that you show. So I'm really, really, really excited today to share that with the broader LinkedIn community. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So just a quick brief intro. Some of you might have seen it from the event bio. Kristen Berman is the co-founder of Irrational Labs, a behavioral economics product design company with author and professor Dan Ariely. So Irrational Labs work with hundreds of companies to increase the health, wealth, and happiness of their users. Kristen have done also a lot of amazing things, including co-founding the Common Sense Lab with Duke University to help improve the financial well-beings of many lower and middle-income Americans. Kristen has also worked with really cool companies like Google and many more to help stand up their behavioral design teams within their company, all for the goal of designing better products. So I can't wait to hear more from you. Thank you so much again, Kristen, for joining us.
Yeah, and lovely to see where everyone is from. So
yes, awesome.
Go Duke.
I was about to say hi to some of the folks. We have a very, very global crowd, and the chat has just exploded. I'm trying to scroll back. There are folks from Germany, Milan, Italy, India, Austin, Texas, Chicago, Tunisia, wow, Philadelphia, UK, Montreal, LA, Island, Indonesia. Wow, thank you so much. Granted, it's Friday night for many of you, so thank you so much for joining us, spending your lovely weekend time to learn from Kristen. So if you have any question for Kristen throughout this live show, please drop them in the chat and we'll pick them out from time to time as we see fit. Okay, so let's get started. Kristen, you call yourself a behavioral scientist. Tell us a little bit more about, sort of let us travel down your memory lane back to like how you get started. What was your path to product and how did you find your passion in behavioral economics? Maybe more basic, just to level set, like what is behavioral economics and what is behavioral design?
Great. So yeah, let's start with the basics of what behavioral economics is. So basically behavioral economics, and many of you may know, is a reaction to economics. And behavioral economics basically says, look, we are not always rational. We make decisions with emotion. We pay attention to social norms. Whereas in the typical econ model, people don't do that, right? We're more robotic. If you have $3, you're thinking about all the ways that you could use $3 from today, what you would buy for lunch, or should you invest this in your retirement fund? Of course, we don't do that. And the field of behavioral economics incorporates that understanding of human psychology in the model of decision making in hopes that we can predict how people will behave. And the good news is that many times this is predictable. And so behavioral economics studies this. And the application of that is really called, behavioral science. And in our world, many times behavioral design, which is more of the process of how do you apply it into products and services. So behavioral science and behavioral economics sometimes can be used interchangeably. There's some people who get really specific about the terms, but in general, they're very similar. And this is really the application. Behavioral science is the application of behavioral economics into our world.
That's awesome. And how did you find your path into that? Was it just all obvious, like you like it during college, or what was the pivotal moment that you had this aha? You're like, oh, I want to become a behavioral scientist. What was the
Yeah.
story?
So I started after college as a product manager at Intuit, and I was running basically customer discovery for QuickBooks Online. For those of you who don't know, QuickBooks Online is an accounting system and would bring people into the lab to think about how and why they would use our features. So really trying to do that core customer discovery. And this is around 2007, 2008. I heard Dan Ariely speak. And if you don't know Dan, this is definitely worth a Google. He wrote Predictably Irrational around that time. And really talked about how do you understand customers, people, ourselves, from more of a scientific manner. And so that really is what behavioral economics is trying to understand people from a scientific manner. Here I was as a product manager going and talking to 5 customers to try to uncover the psychologies that were driving them. And there's this full field of behavioral economics just sitting there, waiting there for us. And so I met Dan, ended up working with him at Google, where we helped found their behavioral economics team. We were embedded within Google for around 3 years doing that, and then evolved and started working with more and more companies. So basically kind of saw the light, followed it, and started working with Dan soon after.
That's really awesome. I wanted to touch upon 2 things. I think first, Intuit was one of those product companies that were known for design thinking, like behavioral design, like thinking through the user's names using human-centered design. So I think it was really great that your first entry into product was working for such an awesome company and such an opportunity. And I love Dan Ariely. First, I read his book, Predictably Irrational, I think 4 years ago at this point. It was just mind blowing. So for anyone who's listening today, like if I have like any, homework to assign to you or recommend it to you, it would be reading Dan's book. So I think it's really excited. He also have a course on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out if you don't have time to read a whole book. I think it's a good summary of a quick takeaways from his theory. So I'd like to know a little bit more about, Kristen, you mentioned you were embedded in Google for 3 years. You were doing all this cool things. Tell us a little bit about Irrational Labs that you founded. And also you spoke about working with Dan, since he's such a well-respected thought leader in the field. So just, would you mind sharing a little bit about how was it like working with him? And yeah.
Great. Yeah. So Irrational Labs, we basically take behavioral insights and help product teams apply them. This looks like, from 0 to 1, taking an opportunity and converting it into a solution. It looks like helping products grow and scale using insights about psychology. So we do design, quantitative research, and experimental RCTs in the field, which normally people call A/B testing. And so our team basically helps kind of see that in the wild. And we say we help people do things that are hard to do in the short run, but good for us in the long run. So a lot of that is around financial behaviors, savings, debt. Some of that's around healthy behaviors, medical adherence, going to the doctor. We just finished an experiment with One Medical where we helped increase bookings by 20% by redesigning some of the flows. Some of that's around happiness. We did an experiment with TikTok where we decreased misinformation by 20%. So generally kind of well-being. So our team, Irrational Labs, thinks about how do you tactically apply these insights to drive behavior change for good. Working with Dan is really incredible. He's kind of a creative, so very scientific mind, but you pair that with a level of creativity that's very impressive. So and a humor. So I think one thing personally I gained from Dan is just a lightness about the world and taking really kind of everything in stride and having kind of fun with each and every day. So if that was my personal life lesson from him, is just having more fun in life.
That's awesome. I love that. We also have some fan for Dan from the audience, right? Presented undergrad studies in front of him. So thank you, Kara, for sharing that experience. Kristen, so you mentioned about a couple of things. I always thought that people working in your field have like the coolest job because you look at how people behave, thinking about what they say they will do and what they actually do, and all that mismatch, understanding the psychology behind why people don't do what they say they would do, actually, quite counterintuitively. So can you walk us through maybe some real life examples, case studies where your team have like used behavioral economic principles to design better products?
Great. Yeah. And I'm going to try to present. So we'll see how this goes. Share screen.
I think it's working.
Actually, I think that was the wrong one. So I'm just gonna
okay.
I'll end up talking about it. So basically, we worked with a company called Steady. They really help gig workers, which are folks who have jobs like Lyft, you have a dog walker, just general kind of not necessarily a W-2 in the US employee. And one of the things that they do is help people find jobs and also manage their income. And so our team built what's called an income tracker for them from the ground up, basically saying, if you have lots of jobs that you're cobbling together, seeing your income in one place is incredibly important. And this was a wildly requested feature. And so we helped them build it. But the problem in product management, as many of you may know, is if you build it, maybe they don't come. And so one of the reasons for that is there could be friction in the way between the great thing that you built and them actually trying to use it. And so in this case, there was friction. The friction was what we call syncing your bank account. So you have to input your bank account password, and then you have to remember it. This is friction. And if you have one number one lesson from behavioral science, is that usually people, your customers, you take the path of least resistance. We do the thing that's easiest to do in the moment. And so when we're trying to design something that helps people get through a high friction moment, we have to think creatively about what is the psychology that could help them get over that. So in the case of Steady, we designed different conditions to help people overcome the friction. So there were 3 conditions, and I'm going to ask you to pick which one won, okay? So the first one was just said, yes, continue, and you had an option to say maybe later. So basically there was a screen that says, yes, continue, I want this income tracker, but you know what, maybe not today, maybe later. The second condition said accept or decline. So we actually asked a hard ask of people. Do you want to accept this feature or do you want to decline it? Okay, you got those 2 conditions in your head. Now the third condition was around completing. So basically finish up, complete, complete. Great. So everyone has those 3 conditions. Could we hear in the chat which of those 3 conditions which condition do people think drove the most people to get over that hurdle of syncing your bank account to the promised land of an income tracker?
So 3, just to recap, right? Drop in the chat, folks. First is yes, continue, or maybe later, right?
Yep.
Second is accept or decline. The third is complete it.
Yep.
Completing, Robin. Completes. Maybe later. I think actually a lot of people are in between number 3, which is complete. And then maybe the second vote will be maybe later.
Yeah.
My goal is complete.
Okay.
Am I right?
You are right. So by the way, if you did not guess, this is a missed opportunity for you to be right. And if you're wrong when you guess, you learn something even more than if you were right. So when people ask you these questions in presentations, you should always be thinking to yourself the answer, because how we learn is by asking and answering questions. So just as a little side note tangent. So what actually happened here? Well, let's just think about the first condition, the one that said continue or maybe later. We're basically asking people to do a really hard thing and then giving them the option to say, do you want to do it tomorrow? Of course we want to do it tomorrow. Tomorrow is always better than today. Tomorrow comes and you want to do it the next day. You want to do it the day after. And so procrastination is one of the big things that you as a product manager have to deal with, where you're going to ask people to do something, get over some friction to get to your value proposition. And the status quo, what they are typically doing is to do nothing. And so you as a product manager have to design these types of benefits. We call them immediate benefits to help somebody have enough motivation to use your product, right? So if you give them outs to say maybe later, that's 100% okay, but they may take that out a little bit more. The other two conditions were creative opportunities to basically help people make a decision in the moment, accept or decline. Wow, you have to decline something? You have to give it up? Right? We're asking people to make a decision. And if they're going to give up this income tracker, by the way, people wanted the income tracker. They already made it through a few flows. This is something that they've opted into, they want, and then they're going to have to make a decision to decline it. So that also worked better than the control. So the first condition was actually the control we had. The second condition, accept decline, worked better than the control. But you guys, a lot of you in the chat are correct that complete, which is completion bias, worked even better than accept and decline. And if you think about human motivation, actually, if anyone's run a marathon, you may know this, but if you get to the finish line, you speed up a little bit. If you're actually swimming and you're swimming towards the end, you swim faster if you can see the end, right? So when the end is in sight, we have more motivation to complete. By the way, I'm not proposing progress bars. Usually in the beginning of a progress bar, people can lose motivation because they're so far away. But in this case, if you're almost complete, this can increase your motivation to finish. We call this the idea of the right for wrong. So in the reality, people wanted this feature, but if we say, look, your financial health in the future will improve if you do this thing today, that's not as motivating, right? So we're helping people do the right thing for the wrong reason. In this case, completion bias was kind of a wrong reason. Like you just because you want to check something off your task list, that's not necessarily the right reason to do this thing that will improve your financial health. And so this is about giving people an immediate benefit to do something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to call out a couple of things. I think it really resonates with our audience. Whenever an option is presented, you cause some friction, and that indecisiveness kicks in to figure out, does it make sense to do it? I also really like what you were saying, the nuance between when you presented that progress bar. I've definitely seen examples where, let's say there's 10 steps or 10 pages that I need to complete. And then sometimes I'm 25% through the process and I was like, man, maybe I just, lose my motivation to do it. But if it shows up, let's say I'm 75% through, then I feel like, okay, let's just get it done. It makes more sense. Awesome. Yeah. I love that. All right. There's one question from Benjamin that asks about, what if they are beginning to discover a product without having to overcommit? Because the flow that you specifically talk about was about, signing up for something and nearly completing the flow, right? What happened if it's just like trying to get people to try out the product, to discover before they even commit? Like, how do you bridge that gap?
Yep. So one, I would say the number one lesson in behavioral science is to experiment, and that context matters. The environment, we say, changes behavior, and the environment in your case is the UX. So before I answer, I would say that's the best approach is to do experiments. You're 100% correct, is that many times this answer of accept or decline is a hard ask. It's really hard. They're giving up something that they already know they want. If they don't know that they want you, then the likely better answer is to get kind of a foot in the door approach, where you're just getting them to progress a little bit without actually having to make a big leap in their decision making. So the word continue can probably push people a little bit farther along the flow, because you're not actually having them make a hard decision. So imagine you have a homepage and you say, sign up now. people have to make a decision to sign up. By the way, nobody wants to sign up. It's not like you get up in the morning and you're like, I would like to create a login and sign up, right? That has no benefit to me. We actually did an experiment with Volunteer Match probably like 6 years ago now, where we changed their sign up button to say sign up or get matched. Get matched is the benefit of Volunteer Match. And we aligned that to the action that the customer was going to do. But if you come back to this question, sign up is a hard ask, right? And so continue could probably help people move people a little bit farther in the flow, a little bit faster. And again, these are things that customers won't tell you. And so that's why behavioral economics tends to be so important, is that you're trying to understand the psychology of decision making that people have in the moment. And it's really difficult to get that out of a customer in the moment, to say, you know what, if you change that button to something else, I may be more likely to click it. We don't really have that assumption about our own behavior, nor do we really put that on customers many times.
That's awesome. I think what you were saying earlier actually brings up another great question from Jose, who's asking about, hey, when you're doing customer or user research, a lot of times people might or might not tell you what they want, like what their true behavior might be. Or a lot of times I also find that during user interview, people tend to inspire the idealistic version of themselves. So they will tell you they would do certain things, but in reality, people can get lazy. It's a tiring day, right? Motivation could be waning. So what are some best practice when it comes to actually identifying the true underlying insight that customer might or might not have been verbalized to you?
Yep. And I want to pause there and kind of highlight that insight, which is that sometimes the customer may not be able to predict their future behavior. So, and then you reading into their preferences, attitudes, or beliefs to predict what they would do based on that could be misguided. So, quick example, we tend to ask the question, do you like apples? And you can think about this question, do you like apples? Many times people raise their hand and say, we have usually about 60% say, yes, I really like apples. 40%, not my first choice. Maybe if it was on buffet. And so when you ask this question, you could then say, look, around 60% of people, if I put out an apple, would eat an apple, right? There's kind of a level of, when you ask that question, you can make a logical leap to say people would actually do the thing. And it turns out, and we helped this company try to redesign their cafeteria, and they'd ask people if they like apples, and 0 people took the apples when they put them out. And so you say, why? Why doesn't our attitudes, our preferences, and our beliefs predict the behavior that we're going to do? And it's because that in that moment, there are other things happening. So kind of there could be fries next to you. And it's like, do you want the fries or the apple? When in the question you asked them, you didn't say, if you had fries or an apple, what would you choose? It also turns out people don't like cut up apples that much. They like cut up apples more than whole apples, right? But in the question, you're not asking them, well, would you eat a whole apple or cut up apple? And so interviews are basically in a vacuum, and you're not actually studying the environment that people are actually going to make the decision. So the punchline in behavioral science, and the punchline for you, would be to really evaluate the environment of decision making and try to figure out what are all the things going on in the environment that they would make that decision in. I tend to say, like, I really like M&Ms. I have a preference for M&Ms. I think they're great. I would eat them all the time. If the M&Ms were far from me, I would eat them less. If the M&Ms were close to me, I would eat them more. Guess what? That doesn't change how I would answer an interview question about my preference for M&Ms. But if you study the environment, you would know that I would eat them more or less depending on where it is. And this physical environment can be translated very easily to your UX environment. And your product world, if you study basically how people are making those decisions. And it may be a good time to jump into the 3 Bs, which is kind of a level of introspection that you can use for your UX. Should I do that now?
Yes. Should I
Okay.
at your screen? Okay.
It's okay.
Awesome.
Actually, I'll just talk through it. I think we don't have too much time, so we'll hit the headlines. So basically, if you're a product manager, this is the framework that we've used with our clients, from Google to the big guys, Microsoft and LinkedIn, to dozens, hundreds actually, small startups that we've worked with. And so it's a 3B framework. And what it is the first B, it should be obvious. It's behavioral economics. So you study the behavior you want to change. If you would do nothing else from this, it's to figure out, and we call it the uncomfortably specific behavior that you want somebody to do. And we are so good as product people at thinking about active use, retention, engagement. Those are outcomes. They're not the behavior. And the only thing you can't say in a behavior change world is log in. It's what do you want them to do after they log in? So that would be the starting point. The next two B's is to reduce barriers to that behavior. That's cognitive friction and logistical friction. So the apple example is logistical friction. You can cut up the apple and people will like it because it's easier to eat, right? Cognitive friction could be uncertainty aversion, regret aversion, could be optimism bias. These are the things that may get in the way of our actual, there could be no logistical friction, but in your head, there may be uncertainty. And so that could prevent you from making the decision. So when you're looking at a flow, you want to think, what is the behavior I want someone to do? How do I reduce barriers to that behavior? And then how do I increase, and we say immediate benefits, not just benefits, but immediate benefits. Those are the three B's. So we'll go through them: behavior, barriers, benefits. And the immediate benefits is really important because you have to get people over the hump, over the friction of doing anything. And I want to, this is so pessimistic a view of the world, but as you study human behavior, you maybe get a little bit more pessimistic, but many times we just do the same thing as we did yesterday, the status quo. So you as a product person need to kind of increase the immediate motivation. These could be things like Peloton gives me streaks. It call me out if I've joined a class for a really long time. It actually, one of the immediate benefits we gave people in that example I gave was completion bias. So it could be social norms. Other people are doing something. It could be a lot of things. And so that's actually where you get to put your creative hat on to drive that motivation up. Oh, I don't think we can hear you. You're on mute.
All right. So many technical glitches today. Sorry about that, guys. And thank you, Kristen. I love the 3B framework. I think it puts into such a concrete step and simple but powerful framework to think about it, especially that Peloton example. I definitely get hooked. I think every time I see, okay, how many streaks, what my performances are, leaderboards, and, stuff like that. That's just, I think one other example that you were putting in your material that I was reading yesterday was like long-term, dental hygiene is something that is a long-term benefit that people do. But we brush teeth not because we think, oh, it's going to be beneficial, because we want that fresh smell now. I think that immediate, benefit is going to be so important to help people drive. I do wanted to ask a follow-up question also from the community. So in that 3B model, the first B is the uncomfortably specific behavior. How do you think you can tie that to a specific business outcome or metrics that you're trying to drive? How do you connect the behavior and the business outcome that you're trying to drive?
Yeah, sometimes when people say we focus on the behavior, they think we're saying measure less. It's like, actually, we want you to measure more. So the idea that the behavior correlates with the outcome is important for the business. So we're not saying don't measure active use, retention, engagement. What we're saying is focus on the behavior that would drive those things and measure if it does drive those things. So let's go back to Peloton. If I were Peloton, I'd say like within 7 days of starting Peloton, I want my user to do two, say, again, uncomfortably specific, 2 10-minute workouts with different instructors. The hypothesis there, right, could be that actually shorter workouts are better. Maybe they're not going to hit the best instructor right away. And so as a Peloton PM, you want to drive retention. And so you want them to get exposed to multiple instructors. You want them to have to be able to do this frequently, so shorter workouts. So they're going to put that there. And now that's easier to design a system that gets people to do that thing. Imagine that they had said, I just want someone to work out. Really difficult to actually get someone to do something if it's so broad, right? Well, what does workout mean? Should they do strength? Should they do meditation? That could be workout. Should they do it a long time? And so by defining it, you get to actually have the hypothesis to see that if it drives your outcome metric.
That's awesome. I know we're also coming short on time, but this is such a powerful framework that our member Garrison have summarized for us. So specific behavior, various and immediate benefits. I think, you have enlightened some of our members, on LinkedIn, and immediately have to look up the 3B framework. If you subscribe to our newsletter, we'll share more links from Kristen and her website with additional resources in case you need a memory refresher or you want to dive in to learn more about the 3B framework. Now, with that, Kristen, are you ready for our lightning round of questions to close out today's session?
Yeah, yes, I am. How fun.
Awesome. So, drum rolls. First question: what is your current favorite product?
My current favorite product, other than LinkedIn Learning.
Thank you. I feel honored.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I use the Marco Polo app a lot. I love voice notes, and Marco Polo is a video messaging platform. So my best friend and I, we do video messages. I just had a 4-month-old child. And so it's fun for me to do a quick video message to her to show her what cute things Ray is doing today.
That's awesome. Wow. I need to check it out. I never heard about it. So something to look forward to.
I would basically say maybe a pro tip would be, if you haven't tried voice notes to friends, they really get a feel for you. It goes from kind of a much more robust relationship. And I think that's, if you think about happiness, we should be all trying to improve our relationships a little bit more.
That's awesome. Yes. And I love your post also from yesterday, how you share about you use behavioral design to help improve your life by cultivating more relationship. So check out Kristen's post. Second question: we know you work closely with Dan Ariely, but who would you consider is the product role model, maybe besides Dan, that has been influential in your product career?
Product role model besides Dan. So I'll give you a couple names. Kelvin Kwong is the VP of product at Big Health. He also has a background in magic, and so has really kind of helped me understand the application of behavioral science to behavioral design. And then Chris York is a thought leader in the behavioral science space. If you ask this man any questions, he will be able to give you a very robust answer. So if those two folks, and you can look them up. I also really appreciate the Peloton PM, David Packles, who is the senior VP of product at Peloton.
That's awesome.
We
have something in common.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just want to say we have something in common, that we both like Peloton a lot, and we refer to it a lot, both as examples and product role models. So
I have a podcast called The Science of Change, where I basically try to pick out products that I like, and then we interview the VP of product to understand how they get the behavior change outcomes. So like Credit Karma, Weight Watchers, we've done LinkedIn, and try to understand these kind of approaches that product managers take using behavioral insights.
That's awesome. Can't wait to check that out. So I like to close today's session with one final lightning round of question. Actually, someone from the community might have also asked you, what's your favorite book at the moment? Or more broadly, what would be one final advice or resource that you like to give to product builders that are listening to our show today?
Great. And I would say for books, we have a list of like the top books, behavioral science books that people could start with. So I'll send that to you and you can pass that on. I particularly like Darwin Economy, which is Robert Franken talks about social norms. It's kind of an under talked about behavioral science book outside of course, Predictably Irrational. And then so that would be my number one, is Predictably Irrational, of course. And so what was the other question? What advice for product folks?
Yeah.
I think the opportunity to basically understand the environment of our decision making. This is kind of the cult principle in behavioral science, is that we are more impacted by our environment than potentially our attitudes, our preferences, and beliefs. And that takes a real being humble and understanding that it's not necessarily how much your customer likes your product. It's how you've designed it to make it easy for them to enjoy it, easy for them to use it, how it fits into their current life. Everyone is a busy person, your customers included. And so you could have designed this most amazing thing, but you have to fit it into their actual life. And so I would say just to be very curious and study the environment of our decision making. So the next time you go into a coffee shop, Think about how things are designed. How many chairs are at the table will decide if people are hanging out for a long time or not. How high the music is, how tall the coffee cups are is going to determine how much coffee people drink. By the way, that's a tip for wine too. If you don't want to drink as much wine, smaller glasses.
That's
So
awesome.
I
Just
would
like
say
if you
get
don't want to
curious.
eat too much food, you have a smaller plate. That would help too.
Exactly.
I love your advice around staying curious. Just be an observer for life. And thank you so much, Kristen, for your time. I know a lot of people asking for how do they check out your podcast, your additional resources, the 3B framework. We're going to send those resources out as part of the recap for this event. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. It will go out next Wednesday. So look forward to that. And I think a lot of our audience are also really liking your session. Very informative session. Thank you with some
Cool.
heart eyes. And thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, Kristen.
Great.